So again, I don't know that we're ever going to really. If your goal is simply avoid suffering, avoid suffering, avoid suffering, you're going to become more anxious because you can't control the world around you. The world around you eventually is going to bring suffering, and it's fallen. It's just the nature of it. And if you do avoid it, you're going to have existential suffering because you're going to realize that again you're weak and you can't handle anything. But if you understand that I'm going to go through suffering no matter what, but I want to discover true purpose, no matter what I'm enduring, whether it's sufferings or blessing, I want to find true purpose and I want my life aimed towards something greater than me. And not just greater, something eternal and something, I would argue, that actually conquers death. If you can do that, then you're gonna have peace no matter what you're doing to some extent.
Yeah, well, it seems like to me that the removal of God from that equation, it's the need to worship something greater than ourselves doesn't really go away. And so I feel that when you remove God from that, you have to replace it with ego. And as far as I can tell, the ego is a representation of Satan, because it is all about self-aggrandizement. It's all about the self and how in love you become with that image that you sort of created in your mind of who you could possibly be. And it's almost sort of like the deal with that Faust made with Mephistopheles, right? Where he gives him everything he wants, but at the end of that comes the time of reckoning, or the time of basically paying back your debt to the devil. Which I could sort of mirror that to somebody that, say, focuses their life on the own pursuit of their own self-aggrandizement, and once they get there, they realize that they're empty, and so they're full of suffering. Um, and so, from your perspective, do you think that as a society, removed God from our day-to-day existence, and that has been replaced with ego, that could be the source of the existential problems that we face a lot, especially in the West?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that, and I think that's where we've come to believe that in order to have a happy life, I need to assert myself as much as possible. You know, that the gospel doesn't say that. The gospel says if you want to find yourself, you need to lose yourself, not assert yourself. And why is asserting yourself a problem? Well, because if you have 10 people in a room all asserting themselves and their own rights and their own desires, you're gonna end up with a lot of conflict. And eventually you end up with the only way to compromise that, and that's, well, let's just have a vote on this. You're always going to have winners and losers in that, and even the winners really deep down end up losing because their life is not rightly ordered. You're absolutely right. If we remove God from the heart, we end up with egoism in its place. And the fathers of the church have a really interesting perspective on this, where they say that there's a difference between being an individual and being a person. An individual is made up of body and soul, but a person is made up of body, soul, and grace. Why? Well, because God intended man to be filled with grace, so that grace is inseparable from him. And grace is, in the Orthodox Church, uncreated. It's the uncreated energies and light of God. So we are meant to be divine human, like not in the same way as Christ, who is divine human. He's divine by essence, and then takes on humanity. We are human by essence, but then take on divinity through grace. This is how man is supposed to be, and this is where man finds true peace in life. If you don't do that, you end up just as an individual, again, fighting for your own rights. And here's the ultimate problem with that. This goes back to that question on atheism. I want to do a video on my three favorite arguments against atheism. Um, and one of the arguments that I think is very powerful is man today, when he has all of his needs and desires met, when he has everything that he could possibly want in life, is miserable.
Mhm.
Materialistic evolution can't account for that. Man should not be miserable in that. Why? Well, because man has deeper desires that transcend the things of this life. He has desires for invisible things and for divine things. And that's why you see, like, for instance, monastics who give up everything, their entire will, all their possessions. I mean, some of them are in monasteries where they can't even take a sip of water without getting a blessing first. And yet, if you meet these people, they're full of joy. It doesn't make any sense unless you understand that there's a divine aspect there. So, my point with this is to say man is ultimately dissatisfied when he's left with just himself. And eventually he's going to look at his life and realize, I'm going to end up in the grave like everybody else. And my force of will, my feeding my own ego, is not going to destroy that death. So what's the point of it all? And that leads us to nihilism. And that's what's
Mhm.
happened in the West. We've been left with nihilism, and we've been left with this idea that I'm just going to fight for my rights here and now because this is all there is. That's all that's left. There's just this now, and I want this life to be as as conformed to my will as possible. Well, that's a pretty miserable life.
I agree with you. What's the role that you think then that Satan plays in all of this? In one of your previous interviews, I mentioned that the devil's job wasn't necessarily to tempt human or to bring them closer to sin. Was that an accurate sort of understanding of that? I mean, and I think it's such a fascinating concept because I almost feel that without that force of sin sort of kind of tugging at us, again, going back to what we mentioned earlier, the contrast, right, is not possible. If you sort of think of it as a hero's journey and that archetype, there has to be a villain in the story, and I feel that from the biblical perspective, that would be Satan. No.
Yeah, I love this question because this is a really fascinating area of Orthodox theology. So the first thing we'll start with the actual fall. You notice that Satan did not tempt Adam and Eve with the idea that they should turn against God.
Mhm.
What he said was, if you eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which God told you not to eat of, you will become like God. So he offers them the same goal, but with the path of disobedience.
Mm.
So this is actually a really fascinating psychological insight into the heart of man. The reason that I said that about this argument against atheism, that we can have all the things that we want in this life and still be dissatisfied, it reveals to us that the heart yearned for something deeper and more transcendent. Every heart is yearning for that. And what we do is Satan tempts us by saying, you know, that part of you, that yearning will be fulfilled if you just do this. If you have this sexual experience, if you eat all this food, if you get really into these television shows and movies, if you buy this phone, if you, whatever it is, if you just do these things, you're finally going to feel happy and fulfilled, and you are going to rest in that. And so we do it. And like 2 seconds later, we go, oh, I'm right back to the way I was. I'm no longer satisfied with my phone. There's a better one out. I'm no longer satisfied with that sexual experience because, well, now I can't stand this person that I slept with. I want to get rid of them and I just want to go on to the next person. I can't, whatever it is. So this is like this constant exchange that we unconsciously have with Satan, where Satan goes, "This will fulfill you." And we go, "Okay, I'll take it." And we go, oh, "I'm not fulfilled." And he goes, "Oh well, maybe that time it wasn't true, but this time it will be." So
Mm.
we do it. Oh, maybe that time it wasn't true. And what's funny is that the proof that we know this innately is that even in secular Hollywood, now I don't know about sitcoms today. Um, I think I watched half an episode of How I Met Your Mother or How I Met My Mother, whatever it's called. I don't know.
Mhm.
But even they had a character that was it was the same on Friends, like Joey was. It was the same on all these shows. Even secular Hollywood knows that people who are striving for just constant pleasure here and now eventually come to the point where they don't feel fulfilled anymore. And that character always, it's always the funny character with his sexual exploits. He always comes to this realization by season 5 or 6 or 7 where he goes, I just want something more serious. I want something real now.
Mhm.
Because even secular Hollywood knows the heart is yearning for something deeper. The problem is that by that point, Satan has helped you to make deep roots in your heart where it's all self-focused. And so you don't even know how to have a relationship by that point. The best way to be happy in a relationship is not to seek your happiness, but to seek the happiness of your spouse. How am I going to be fulfilled in my marriage? By every day waking up and saying, what can I do or say today to make my wife happy? What can I do to put a smile on her face? And the happier she is, the happier I am, the more fulfilled I am. And if she's doing the same thing, that's a good marriage.
Mhm.
But Satan has taught us to be self-focused and to say, well, how can I get what I want out of this all the time?
Mhm.
So, so yeah, Satan is constantly saying, I know you have these deep yearnings, but if you search God, that's hard work. Then you have to get rid of all this other stuff that you really love. Don't do that. Just keep filling yourself. More material stuff, more worldly stuff, more experiences, more comfort, more pleasure, more entertainment. And he lies to us again and again and again, and we keep falling into that trap. So again, St. Maximus, he says something really fascinating. He says the difference between the worldly way led by the devil and the heavenly way, which is given to us by Christ, is this. In the worldly way, it says, seek pleasure here and now. But at the end, your pain actually increases. Your dissatisfaction and torment increases
Mhm.
because the further you get away from God, the more dissatisfied you are. That's why, really wealthy people who have everything, the stock market plunges, you see suicides rise up. They've put all their hope there.
Mhm.
Where he says the Christian way is to say, seek deprivation and pain now in asceticism, fasting, prayers, prostrations, almsgiving, not being attached to things of this world. But in the end, peace and joy are what result. So that's the question. And again, as an analogy, there's a physical analogy to this. Do you want a healthy body? Well, you can have the pleasure right now and just eat junk and never go to the gym and never work out. You can have all that pleasure, but in the long run, you're going to end up with a lot of physical maladies and you're going to end up more miserable than when you started.
Mhm.
Or what you can do is say, I'm going to go through the tough work. I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat well. I may not get as much pleasure as I would otherwise, but in the long run, I'm going to be healthier and happier because of it. The same is true of the human soul.
Could it also be said that, because I find that concept so fascinating that, if they ate from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and so could you interpret that also to say that because of our over reliance on looking at life through analytical processes, we lose the ability to access the divine. So, for example, if an atheist reads the Bible, they're interpreting it without that spiritual dimension, which makes it lose its depth and almost be a book of nonsensical stories in their view. However, when you look at this from a deeper, more archetypical way, it almost has an infinite depth of meaning. So it,
Mhm.
could that also be an interpretation of that particular instance, you feel?
Yes, yeah. This is another area that I love to talk about and read about because it's really fascinating. Um, the Orthodox Church is not, it doesn't believe in doing theology primarily by logic.
Mm.
It's not about the rational processes. People hear that and they think that we're somehow anti-rational or anti-logic. That's not true at all. I mean, you can't read the church fathers and see they were all steeped in the philosophy of their time and knew all the philosophical and rhetorical rules. They knew all the laws of logic, and they utilized these. But these are seen as tools.